Hello, boys and girls. Welcome back to Storytime with Miss Crystal. Today, we will be reading Brand New Pencils, Brand New Books. The author and illustrator of our story is Diane DeGroat. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoyed this story. Tomorrow's the first day of school, Father said. Do you have everything ready? I do, said Gilbert. I do too, said Lola. I'm going to school with Gilbert. Gilbert frowned. No, Lola, he said. I'm going to big kids' school. You're going to preschool. At bedtime, Gilbert checked his new backpack. Inside were his brand new pencils and his brand new notebooks. He was excited about being in first grade. Lola had a new backpack too. Inside was her stuffed rabbit. Lola wasn't excited. Gilbert said, Preschool is fun, Lola. Mrs. Duck is nice. Lola sighed. I'll go, she said, but I won't like it. The next morning, Gilbert walked to school with Patty and her mother. I hope Mrs. Bird is nice, Patty said. Gilbert stopped walking and said, Uh-oh, what if she's not? Patty pulled his arm. Then we'd better walk fast. If we're late, maybe she'll send us to the principal. He looks mean, Gilbert said. Let's walk very, very fast. When they got to school, Patty's mother introduced them. The very tall teacher bent down. Hello, Patty. Hello, Gilbert, she said, smiling. Please leave your things in your cubbies, then go sit on the carpet. Patty hugged her mother goodbye. Gilbert wished that his mother was there to hug too. Gilbert found a cubbyhole with his name and his photograph on it. He looked at the photographs on the other cubbies. He didn't know anyone except Patty. Patty sat down next to a girl named Margaret, and Gilbert sat next to Patty. Patty talked and laughed with Margaret until Mrs. Bird turned the lights off and on. Their kindergarten teacher never turned the lights off and on. Everyone suddenly grew quiet. Good morning and welcome to first grade, Mrs. Bird said. A boy named Philip held up a big fat book and said, I know how to read. Mrs. Bird smiled and said, Thank you for sharing, Philip. This year we will all learn how to read. Now, everyone, please take your seats. Gilbert was worried. He couldn't read the kind of book that Philip could. Gilbert took the desk next to Patty's. Suddenly, a big kid said, Can't you read? He pointed to the name taped to the front of the desk. It says Lewis. That spells Lewis. Gilbert turned red. He didn't know there were names on the desks. He quickly got up and found a desk that said Gilbert. A boy was already sitting there. The boy turned red and moved to the desk that said Frank for Frank. Mrs. Bird handed out spelling books and reading books and special paper to write on. Gilbert could see that first grade was going to be hard. At snack time, Lewis shouted, Oh boy, chocolate cookies. Mrs. Bird turned to him and said, We don't shout in class, Lewis. That's a rule in first grade. She wrote on the chalkboard, Rules. Number 1, use your quiet voice. Then she asked, What are some other rules we should follow? Patty raised her hand and said, We should say please and thank you. Mrs. Bird wrote it on the board. Gilbert knew that rule and wished he had said it first. Mrs. Bird listed all the rules they could think of until Gilbert finally added, You should always sit at the right desk. At lunchtime, Mrs. Bird brought her class to the cafeteria. Gilbert had never eaten in the cafeteria with the big kids before. He looked for Patty, but she was already sitting next to Margaret. There was an empty seat next to Lewis, but Gilbert didn't want to sit there. He finally sat by himself. He wasn't hungry, but if he didn't eat his lunch, maybe he would get sent to the principal. As he started eating, Mrs. Bird walked toward him. Oh, here's a seat, she said to the boy named Frank. Frank sat down next to Gilbert, and Gilbert saw that he had the exact same Martian space pilot lunchbox. At recess, Frank and Gilbert climbed all the way to the top of the climbing fort. Philip was a good reader, but he was not a good climber. When he tried to go up the ladder, he kept tripping on his big feet. After recess, they painted pictures to go into the rule book. Louis was a good climber, but he was not a very good painter. He spilled green paint all over his desk. He yelled, "Ugh!" forgetting all about the number 1 rule, not to shout in class. After they cleaned up, it was quiet time. Gilbert thought that quiet time meant nap time, like in kindergarten, but it really meant that everyone could pick out a book to read alone. Gilbert picked a Frog and Toad book and brought it to the new beanbag chair. Everyone was very quiet, especially Louis. He had fallen asleep reading Good Night Moon. When the bell rang at the end of the day, Gilbert wasn't ready to go home. He was still reading Frog and Toad Are Friends when his mother came to pick him up. Philip was helping him with the words he didn't know. "I know how to read," Gilbert announced proudly. "Take the book home, Gilbert," said Mrs. Bird. "See if you can finish it." "I have homework too," Lola said to Mrs. Bird. "I have to write my name 10 times. School is very hard." On the way home, Patty and Gilbert agreed that Mrs. Bird was very nice. Then Gilbert asked his sister, "Did you like Mrs. Duck, Lola?" "Yes," said Lola, "and I like my new friend. His name is Sam." "I made a new friend too," Gilbert said, "and so did Patty." Patty said, "No, I didn't. Margaret is my friend from dance class. She's an old friend, just like you, Gilbert." "Oh," Gilbert said. He was glad that he was still Patty's old friend. When they got home, Lola got a pencil and paper. She wrote her name 10 times. "I can read," she said to Gilbert. Then she read, "Lola, Lola, 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 Lola." "I can read too," Gilbert said. He read, "Frog and Toad Are Friends" to Lola. He guessed all the words that he didn't know, but Lola said he was a good reader, just like Mrs. Duck. After dinner, they went out for ice cream to celebrate the first day of school. When they walked into the ice cream shop, Gilbert said, "Look, there's my friend Frank." Lola said, "There's my friend Sam." Father said, "And there's Mr. Pug, the principal." Lola and Sam ate strawberry ice cream, and Gilbert and Frank ate chocolate. Mr. Pug had pistachio ice cream with sprinkles on top. And Gilbert knew that, as a rule, anyone who liked sprinkles on their ice cream had to be a very nice person. All right, boys and girls, I hope you enjoyed this reading of Brand New Pencils, Brand New Books. If you would like to add this book to your collection, I'll have it linked down below in the description box. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel so you don't miss any uploads that I add. I hope you'll have a wonderful day, and I will see you again soon in a couple of days with a new read aloud. Bye-bye!